ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing with our series, The Vedanta by Dr. V.S. Gate. Up until now, we talked about we're in the introduction, and we're just getting a summary study of Shankaracharya's philosophy, Ramanujacharya's philosophy, and I think Nimbarka's philosophy. Now we're going to talk about Madhva. And so let's take it up. The doctrine of Madhva, purely dualistic in character, insists on the absolute and eternal difference between Brahman, Jiva, and Jada, that is, the Lord, the souls, and the world. Madhva denies even Brahman's being the material cause of the universe. So if we remember, all of the previous teachers have accepted that Brahman is not only the efficient cause, but also the material cause of the creation of the universe. So he's not only the potter, but also the clay out of which the pot is made, to give the Upanishadic example. So Madhva denies even Brahman's being the material cause of the universe, a point clearly established in the Brahma Sutras, and the very fantastic and forced manner in which he interprets many of the sutras leaves no doubt about the fact that he would have even set aside the sutras altogether, but that their uncontested authoritativeness prevented him from doing so. That's a pretty strong statement. In opposition to the pure or qualified monism of other Vedanta schools, Madhva propounds the 5 eternal distinctions, so Panchabheda, the clear understanding of which alone will lead to moksha, the distinction between God and the individual soul, between God and the inanimate world, between one individual soul and another individual soul, between the individual soul and the inanimate world, and finally between one inanimate object and another. So these are the 5 Panchabhedas, five distinctions that Madhva accepts. God, according to Madhva, possesses an infinite number of qualities. His chief functions are 8: creation, protection, dissolution, controlling all things, giving knowledge, manifestation of himself, involving the individual souls in the knowledge of the world, and deliverance. His form is made up of knowledge and joy. He is independent of everything and remains one in the midst of different forms. The individual souls are all distinct from God and distinct from each other individually, innumerable, going through a succession of existences and characterized by ignorance or other defects. The world is created from Prakriti, or material nature, matter, which is ever distinct from the Supreme Soul, who is thus only the efficient cause, Nimittakarana, not Upadanakarana, but not the material cause of the universe, for it is against reason to suppose that the non-intelligent world can be produced from a being that is intelligent. Moksha, or liberation, is attained by the direct knowledge or perception of Hari, meaning Vishnu or Narayana. Some of the means necessary for this direct knowledge are vairagya, which is aversion to the enjoyments of this world or the next, the possession of equanimity, shama, self-control and other virtues, acquisition of knowledge from the guru, self-surrender, sharanagati, love of God, paramatma bhakti, resigning every act to Hari, knowledge of the 5 distinctions mentioned above, etc. Even in moksha, or liberation, the jiva cannot be one with Brahman. Then again, the bhoktri, the enjoying self, the bhogya, the objects of enjoyment, and then Niyamaka, the controller of the controlling supreme spirit, are three entities eternally distinct and all equally real. Thus, Madhva always lays stress on those passages of the Upanishads which clearly proclaim the difference between Brahman and the Jiva, such as Shvetashvatara 1.6, 4.5, 4.6, Mundaka 3.1.2, etc. While those passages referring to non-difference are explained away by him in various ways. Thus, Tattvamasi means tat, tadiya, asi, or tattvam tasya asi, thou art his, not thou art that. I am Atma Brahma may be a description of jiva, meaning this individual soul grows or advances, vardhana shilaha, or a description of Brahman, meaning Brahman is this that pervades, Atma atan shilaha, or it may be a mere eulogy of the jiva, or the sentence may be meant for meditation, or finally, it may be nothing but a statement of the Purva Paksha, in other words, the initial wrong doctrine, right, of the exponent of the Maya doctrine, the doctrine of illusion, in other words, Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. In the same way, a passage like Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati, one who knows Brahman becomes Brahman itself, only means that in the condition of moksha or liberation, the individual soul in question becomes similar to Brahman, owing to his freedom from misery, etc. And thus is to be understood in a metaphorical sense, as in Puro Hito Yam Raja Samvritaha. This priest has become a king. So it's just an analogy. It's not really, the priest doesn't actually become a king. He's like a king because for some reason, maybe he's given dakshin or whatever. Moreover, it cannot be said that Jiva and Brahman are different in samsara, but become non-different after moksha or liberation. For what is different can never be non-different and vice versa. So also, ekam eva dvitiyam brahma and sarvam kalvidam brahma mean that Brahman is unsurpassed and without a parallel, and that it pervades the whole world, but not that the world is non-different from Brahman. Mrityo samrityam apnoti ya iha naneva pashyati does not imply a condemnation of the perception of plurality, but it is a censure against those who hold that there are many momentary cognitions instead of one eternal knowledge. Just as, for instance, asmad evedam agra asit only states the view of the nihilist for being refuted further on. Duality alone can be the truth, argues the dualist. For we everywhere see nothing but pairs or things in twos. That is, knowledge and ignorance, merit and demerit, man and woman. So also Brahman and Jiva, or Brahman and Prakriti, must be two entities and never identical with each other. So that's a very, very terse summary of Madhva's philosophy. We'll see later on, he'll go into more details. But we can see that, Sanskrit is such a language that it can definitely be interpreted. These sentences, Upanishadic sentences, can definitely be interpreted in more than one way. So now we come to the doctrine of Vallabha or Vallabhacharya. The doctrine of, who was a contemporary of Chaitanya. The doctrine of Vallabha is called Shuddhadvaita. That is, the unity of Brahman, which is pure or free from Maya or illusion. Thus, the jiva and the inanimate world are essentially the same as Brahman without involving any idea of Maya or illusion. According to Shankara, for instance, the Brahman can create this world only when it is conditioned by Maya or illusion. But according to Vallabha, it is Brahman, pure and simple, and without any connection with Maya or illusion, that can create the universe. The jiva is non-different from Brahman, atomic in size, see sutras 2, 3, 194, and part of and a part of Brahman. So it is non-different from Brahman, atomic in size, and a part of Brahman. See Sutras 2, 3, 43. It is produced from Brahman in the sense in which sparks are produced from a fire. The jiva is a manifestation of Brahman itself, with the attribute of bliss obscured, and I would say also knowledge obscured, in the case of, yeah. Thus, it is an eternal and real, it is as eternal and real as Brahman. And production in its case means only a manifestation, or avirbhava. Manifestation means avirbhava, right? Sometimes we use this word avirbhava for appearance, for the birthday of certain persons, or the appearance day of avatars. Avirbhava means manifestation and not a production. So if something manifests, it appears before us, but it may have reality in some other place before it appears before us. It's just an appearance in front of us. It's not actually being made in front of us or created at any time. So the jiva is either one, Shuddha, pure, or when its qualities such as greatness, Aishwarya, are not obscured by contact with avidya, ignorance, or two, samsarin, when it is in bondage, it is in the bondage of avidya or ignorance and experiences birth, death, etc., owing to its connection with the subtle and gross bodies. Or three, mukta, in other words, liberated, when it becomes free from bondage by means of vidya or knowledge. So he's given three types of jivas here: Shuddha, pure, samsarin, and a liberated. So liberation comes about, mukta comes about. This is equivalent to the idea of having nityasiddhas or nityasuris, who are never touched by ignorance and distress. People who are in bondage in this material world, nitya samsarins, or Bhaddha-jivas, and then the muktas who were nitya samsarins or Bhaddha-jivas and who attained moksha. So he has this three triple division of souls here. When it becomes free from bondage by vidya or knowledge, the jiva, though atomic, can pervade the whole body by virtue of its quality of intelligence, chaitanya. Chaitanya variously means consciousness or intelligence. Just as sandalwood can, by its fragrance, make its existence known, even where it does not exist. So this is from Brahma Sutras 2, 3, 25, 26, and 23. So this is an analogy that the perfume of sandalwood pervades the air, even when the sandalwood itself is gone somewhere else. So the inanimate world, or prapancha, is also essentially Brahman, Brahmatmaka, with the qualities of intelligence, Chaitanya, and bliss, Ananda, obscured, and thus possessing. So this is interesting. So I guess the reason why he didn't say that intelligence was obscured for the jiva was because all jivas have some sort of consciousness. So in this case, he is translating Chaitanya as intelligence. I would have translated it as consciousness. So there's the difference between inanimate matter, achit, or what's called here jada, or matter, is it's unconscious, whereas the jiva is chit, or is conscious. It has Chaitanya, or this consciousness as its aspect, which is a form of knowledge. So in the inanimate world, prapancha is also essentially Brahman, Brahmatmaka, and with the qualities of intelligence, Chaitanya, or we can say Chit, right? And bliss, Ananda, obscured. And thus possessing the only one quality of sattva, that is Sat. So out of Sat, Chit, and Ananda, the Vallabha is saying that the matter only has this one quality of Sat, or Sattva. It is, Sattva means existence. It means existence. So it is at the time created from Brahman, Brahmakarya, in the sense that Brahman itself is manifested in the form of the gross world. Thus, the creation and the destruction of objects in this world mean only the manifestation, avirbhava, and disappearance, tirobhava, of the Bhagavat, the Lord, or Brahman, in those forms. And when Brahman appears as a product and as capable of being experienced, anubhava yogya, the world is created. But when it goes back into its causal form and ceases to be the object of ordinary experience, the world is destroyed. The world is therefore as eternal and real as the Brahman itself, its creation and destruction being nothing but the powers, shaktis, of Brahman. It is neither illusory nor essentially different from the Bhagavat, or God, or Brahman. Everything being Brahman, we must find the forms of all things in everything. Thus, for instance, in a jar or pot, anything like patatva, the nature of a cloth, will manifest itself by the will of God, the nature of a cloth. I'm not sure whether he's mixing metaphors here, and he's talking about, thus, for instance, in a jar. Does he mean in a cloth? Anything like patatva, or the nature of a cloth may manifest itself by the will of God, but as a matter of fact, all these have disappeared, tirobhuta, and it is only gatatva, the nature of a pot, that is manifest, avirbhuta. And so a jar cannot, for the time being, serve its purpose of a cloth. No, he's not mixing metaphors. What he's saying is, he's saying a jar or a pot has the nature of a pot, and it doesn't have the nature of a cloth. And so, but he's saying that because it's Brahman, it could have the nature of a pot, but a cloth, but it only manifests through, I don't know, the power of Brahman. It only manifests this nature of being a jar or a pot. Sort of a strange analogy, but anyway, I wonder if there's some Upanishadic statement like this. Maybe we'll see later on. From this, it follows that the relation between cause and effect, what's he trying to get at, is absolute unity. From the Bhagavat, in which another manifests itself is the cause, clay, and the other form manifest is the effect, pot. Thus, sarvam kalvidam brahma has to be understood in literal sense. Yes, and we have a very strong opinion. Yes, a very strong opinion about Madhva, I think. I'm not sure. But the infatuating ignorance affects the jiva, and for him endows the real and actually existing world with illusory or unreal forms. While the world is real, it is only its experience, pratiti, is it? Which is erroneous. Just as, for instance, to a man in a boat in motion, the trees on the bank appear steady. Those steady appear to be in motion, because if the boat is moving down the river. But in the cognition of the moving trees, it is only the movement. It is only the movement that is so that's a cognition of moving trees, right? It is only the movement that is illusory, while the form of the trees is real. In the same way, the world, which has objectivity for us, but which is essentially of the nature of Bhagavat, God, and is purely subjective, is real in form, but it is only the objectivity with which the jiva endows the world that is unreal and projected by ignorance. Thus, this prapancha, which is real, appears to be in three different forms to three different kinds of persons. One, to those who become Brahman, it appears as pure Brahman. So in other words, the liberated person, right? Two, to those who have got the right knowledge by means of Shastras, it appears to be endowed with both subjectivity, Brahma Dharman, and objectivity, Maya Dharman. Okay, so to a mukta who has attained knowledge of Brahman, or not by means of shastras, by means of scriptures, right? He sees it for both things. He sees it as spiritual, but as Brahman, and also as matter. At the same time, with the clear discrimination between the real character of the former, right, Brahman, and the unreal character of the latter, in other words, matter. As, for instance, a grown-up person seeing a piece of cloth appearing green, owing to his own green spectacles, perceives the reality of the form of the cloth and the unreality of the greenness, which does not really belong to the piece of cloth. And three, finally, for those without knowledge, the prapancha appears to be endowed with both of these forms. Right, he's talking about the analogy of the green tinged glasses and the cloth, but without discrimination, as for instance, a child with green spectacles taking the greenness of the cloth to be as real as the cloth itself. Thus, in the difference or plurality, then all the difference and plurality is in the matter of perception, pratiti, of the prapancha, and not at all in the matter of its form, svarupa. Okay. To say that the prapancha itself is unreal, and at the same time to say that it is identical with Brahman, is against all reason, since relation of identity cannot possibly exist between a real thing and an unreal thing. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Sutra 2.1.14. The Brahman is one, eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, possessed of an infinite number of attributes, and essentially of the nature of Sat, existence, Chit, intelligence, and Ananda, bliss. It is Shuddha, pure, that is, never contaminated by connection with Maya or illusion. It is possessed of Aishwarya, marvelous power, which makes everything possible for it, and even things mutually opposed can coexist in its case. Okay, we'll have to see some examples of that. Thus, both kinds of passages, those which describe the Brahman as qualified, savishesha, and those which describe it as non-qualified, nirvishesha, are equally true with regard to it. Or the denial of attributes refers to the attributes of the non-intelligent world, prakrita, from which Brahman is free. So negative, as Ramanuja says, he has all unlimited auspicious attributes, but no inauspicious attributes, right? So while the affirmation of attributes refers to the infinite number of marvelous powers which it possesses, and thus establishes that the Brahman is extraordinary, Jagat Vilakshana, Brahman manifests itself at its own will as Jiva or Jada. Jiva means the soul and Jada means matter, right? Simply for the purpose of sport, without undergoing any change in essence, as when, for instance, a serpent forms itself into coils. Sutra 3.2.27. So when a snake coils itself up and goes to sleep, right, or coils itself up for some reason, the coils exist, but then when the snake moves, it stretches out and there's no more coils. Another example would be when a person sits down, he has a lap, but when he stands up, he has no lap, but it's still the same person. So these things are actually not, they're not real in the sense of being permanent, but they're manifestations. Thus, the Brahman is both the material and efficient cause of the universe. Notice in this connection the explanation of Sutra 1.1.4 and the objections on the ground of partiality and cruelty belonging to Brahman, owing to the diversity of fortune and miseries to be met with in this world, objections which can be raised only on the assumption of a difference of nature between Brahman and Jiva, have no place in Vallabha's doctrine. The Brahman has three forms. One, the highest divine form, Adidaivika, as Krishna or Purushottama, possessing an infinite number of auspicious attributes attainable by the devotee bhakta. 2, the akshara form, adhyatmika, in which all the attributes have become non-manifest and which alone is attainable by a sage or jnani, so some impersonal form. And 3, the antaryamin or the supersoul form as seen in the different incarnations and avatars of Vishnu. Now, what is the relation between Brahman, the Jiva, and the Jada, the souls in the world? It is one of pure identity, one that exists between a part, or an amsa, and the whole, the amsin. For Vallabha, there is a non-difference, abheda, alone, that is real, vastavika, while all difference is simply for the sake of sport, in opposition to both Ramanuja and Nimbarka. According to these latter, though both difference and non-difference are theoretically equally real, vastavika, it is difference only that is real, while the non-difference is accounted for by the similarity of nature between Brahman and Jiva, or by the relation of dependence between the two, niyamya, niyantritva. Thus, the phrase Tattvamasi is literally true, according to that thou art, is literally true according to Vallabha, whereas it has to be understood metaphorically by all the rest. So we're getting the idea here that Vallabha is trying to have oneness, Advaita, in a pure way, without any tinge of Maya, without any illusion or ignorance or agyana, that which is in Shankara's system. So the moksha, which consists of the absolute cessation of all misery and experiencing of bliss, which was observed in the condition of samsara, can be attained by two means: bhakti, devotion, and jnana, knowledge. Of these, the former is superior, that is, bhakti or devotion, which, since it leads to the realization of the divine form of Brahman as Krishna or Purushottama, in which the anandamsa is at its best. The part of bliss, the part of bliss is at its best, while the latter is inferior as it leads to the realization of the second or non-determinate form of Brahman, in other words, the impersonal form, which he talked about above, right? Where the Ananda Amsa is of an inferior order. So the bliss of Brahman, of impersonal Brahman, is, according to Vallabha, a lower thing. So bhakti itself is of 2 degrees, Maryada Bhakti and Pushti Bhakti. So in the former, Maryada means honor, honorific devotion. Pushti means nourishing devotion. So in the former, the devotee attains moksha or liberation by the practice of means or sadhana on his part, such as the disciplines and the restraints laid down in the scriptures or shastras, which produce an aversion to worldly things, worship and prayer of the Bhagavat or God. In the latter, that is the Pushti Bhakti, right, of which, and this is a higher kind of bhakti, the devotee without having recourse to any sadhanas depends upon nothing but pure and simple love of him, love of God. His goal is only the service of Hari. His highest pleasure is to become one with the associates of Hari and to sport with him in the celestial Vrindavan. So this is analogous to the Gaudiya understanding of sadhana bhakti or Vaidhi bhakti and Raganuga sadhana bhakti or Raga bhakti, right? The bhakti of rules and regulations, and the bhakti of bhava, the bhakti of feeling, like that. So Vallabha just calls them by Maryada Bhakti and Pushti Bhakti. But Vallabha's Sampradaya is called Pushti Marga, the path of nourishment, the path of this raga or bhava, this type of bhakti of pure love, pure and simple love. So this Pushti Bhakti is a privilege of only him whom Bhagavat is pleased to favor. So in order to take to this, you have to be favored by God. It means with preman or love, which removes the liking for anything but Hari, and passing through Ashakti, which produces a positive aversion to objects not connected with Hari, culminates in Vyasana, or entire devotion to Hari. In addition to the three prasthanas, or three primary philosophical texts, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras, the Vallabha school has a fourth one, the Bhagavata, or the Bhagavad Purana, passages of which are very often adduced in the Vallabha Bhashya. So Vallabha's Bhashya on the Vedanta Sutras, he uses Bhagavatam passages. And Vallabha wrote a big commentary on the Bhagavata also called Subodhini. Thus, we see that these five schools of Vedanta agree in holding, number one, that Brahman is the supreme cause of the universe. Two, that Brahman is all-pervading and eternal. Three, that the Upanishads in the first instance and the Brahma Sutras and the Gita are the basis of their doctrines, right? Four, that in supersensuous and purely metaphysical matters like Brahman, the scriptures are the first authority and reasoning is to be accepted as long as it does not go against the revelation. In other words, revelation meaning the Vedas, the Vedic point. Reasoning has a jurisdiction over them, but only with its limitations. The revelation is the final court of appeal. And five, that the actions are subordinate to knowledge or devotion. That is, karma yoga is subordinate to jnana yoga or bhakti yoga. Thus, they're efficacious only for the purification, that is, actions, of the mind, and as a preparation for the right path, renunciation of them being quite necessary for the final beatitude or liberation. So he's saying all these different schools, they all accept that actions have to be given up finally, right? In different ways. Okay, so in general, he's saying this. So in 6, that deliverance from this beginningless samsara is the final goal. Now, Shankara's doctrine is distinguished from the rest in as much we can say, what about Gaudiyas? Let's just say, because it's not included in this book, we just have a say. So do Gaudiyas believe that Brahman is the supreme cause of the universe? Yes. That he's all-pervading internal? Yes. The Upanishads, the Prasthanatrayi, the Brahma Sutras, the Gita, the Upanishads are the basis for their doctrines. Gaudiyas would say, and the Bhagavatam, and they would say the Bhagavatam is more important. Vallabhacharya also adds the Bhagavatam, but he doesn't say that the Bhagavatam is more important, as Jiva Goswami does. So it's about the same, right? Scripture is the final revelation, and the final understanding of philosophy comes from scripture, yes, and not from reasoning, yes, that they all accept, including the Gaudiyas. That actions are subordinate to knowledge and devotion. Gaudiyas would say that even knowledge is subordinate, but also actions are subordinate to devotion, yes. The Gaudiyas would say karma and jnana yoga are subordinate to bhakti yoga. That deliverance from the meaning of samsara is the final goal. Gaudiyas might have a slight difference with this, and they might say, well, liberation itself is not the final goal, but actually love of God or prema is the final goal. So anyway, very much in the same vein as all the other schools of Vedanta. Shankara's doctrine is distinguished from the rest in as much as, one, okay, so how is Shankara's distinguished? He admits Maya, or illusion, which the other 4 schools agree in pretending to discard. Agreed in pretending to discard. I don't know what he means exactly by that. Anyway, he admits Maya, which the other 4 schools agree in pretending to discard. 2, he insists on knowledge as the sole means to moksha, while the rest insist on bhakti or devotion. Okay. So the 4 Vaishnavite schools, that is Nimbarka, Ramanuja, Vallabha, and Madhva, alike maintain, number 1, that bhakti is the means of attaining moksha. 2, that Brahman is Ishvara, possessed of an infinite number of auspicious attributes. 3, that the individual souls in the inanimate world are all as real as Brahman itself. 4, that their individual distinctions can never be completely lost. 5, that the individual souls are atomic, infinite in number, and all possessed of the attributes of knowing and acting. Now, the school of Madhva stands apart in that, number 1, it maintains absolute duality, while all the rest try to reconcile duality with unity in one way or another. 2, it holds that Brahman is only the efficient cause and not the material cause, so only the nimitta karana, not the upadan karana of the universe, while all the rest agree in holding that it is both. And 3, consequently, its admission of the authority of the Upanishads and Sutras in practice is rather in theory than in practice, right? Because why would that be? Okay, so consequently, its admission of the authority of the Upanishads and Sutras in particular, it is rather in theory than in practice. I'm not quite sure why he says that about Madhva. So, as for the mutual relations of the 3 entities of Brahman, Chit, and Achit, so Chitta, Chit, Ishvara, right? So each of the 5 schools has its own doctrine, which has given each its distinctive character and name.
Om Namo Narayana